Back to Saturdays off the ball, so we're focusing on rugby for the next little while because it's a huge weekend. Quarter-final weekend in the Heineken Champions Cup. Leinster against Ulster, full live and exclusive commentary coming your way from 5:45. But right now, Munster are in action and they're involved in a typical Heineken Cup Munster quarter-final. It's an all-out war. They haven't really performed at all yet, but they're hanging on in there. It's Edinburgh 10, Munster 7. We're in the final minute of the first half. Will O'Callaghan is over at Murrayfield. We have the Irish Independent's Cian Treacy and the former Connacht player Michael Swift in studio alongside me. Cian, you've been watching the opening half. I was saying, this is typical Munster. They've been in the opposition 22 once, scored this ingenious try, fortuitous as well, I think, through Keith Earls, but it's been all Edinburgh, but Munster are somehow still right in it.
Yeah, I think they would have taken that. Edinburgh started so quickly and Munster were sort of holding on a bit, but some outstanding defence. Jack O'Donoghue did brilliantly, but he's actually gone off now for a HIA as well. Joey Carberry's gone off. Ty Burns spent 10 minutes in the bin, which ironically enough that was when Munster scored the try. So I think with all of that they'll be glad to get to half time just 3 points down, but like you said, they haven't played much rugby yet. It's Edinburgh who are looking to play it, and I think if they're going to turn around they're going to have to show maybe a little bit more ambition in the second half.
Why have Edinburgh been so dominant, Michael?
I suppose if you look at it on paper to begin with, Edinburgh have done fantastically well in the Pro 14. Their record at home has been very strong this year. I think all their game is based around a very attritional type of play, with Richard Cockrell at the helm. They have a strong set piece, as you would expect, line out and scrum. And for the first, as I said, as Cian said, for the first 10 minutes, it was all Edinburgh. But a typically kind of monster effort in Europe, and they managed to somehow kind of escape the onslaught from the first 10 minutes. But it's been a bit more of an open game than I had expected. A lot of both teams kind of very much rely on a kick pressure type game. But it's been a little bit more open, as I said, and Edinburgh have had the more line breaks. But as we said, in Europe, you can never knock Munster off, and they always seem to keep coming back and just staying in the game. Maybe not playing to their potential, but they're staying in the game, and it looks like it's going to be 10-7 at half time, and they very much see themselves with a chance to win in the second half.
I think one of the things that's shown as well is Edinburgh played quite a strong team against Leinster last weekend. Munster didn't have pretty much all of their internationals, obviously with the IRFU's player management programme. I think that's shown a bit in the first half. Edinburgh look a bit more cohesive than Munster, but again, look, it's half time there, 3 points down. I think they'll happily take that.
Yeah, the half-time whistle has gone at Murrayfield, so it's Edinburgh 10, Munster 7 at the break. Let's go across to Murrayfield. Will O'Callaghan has been watching the opening 40 minutes. Talk us through as well.
Yeah, I think probably not too dissimilar to what you guys have been chatting about. Edinburgh will probably feel that they should be further ahead at half-time. They do lead here against Munster by 10 points to 7. Again, I guess Munster were able to hang in games. They really should have conceded points in the first 10 to 15 minutes, but their defence were able to keep Edinburgh out when they decided to kick for the corner on 3 different occasions as opposed to going for points. Then in the 19th minute, it's just a very quick moment of thought from Keith Earls. Munster awarded a penalty. Stupid decision when you look back at the replay and the highlights here at half-time. Henry Pyrgos, the Edinburgh scrum half, was miles offside at the back of the Munster scrum. Keith Earls takes the quick tap and go, and Edinburgh just didn't react. They were quicker to the referee than they were to Keith Earls after he went over for the try. Joey Carberry puts it over.
Yeah, what was the reaction in the stadium there? Because I think Edinburgh were probably right to go quickly to the referee, because obviously you say it was very stupid to give the initial penalty away, but in the split second after the penalty was given, Conor Murray sort of did a Bret Hart sort of backflip trying to get him into perfect position, and right under the referee's nose. Now maybe the referee just turned his back at the right time, but it definitely looked as though the penalty might be cancelled.
Yeah, well, the hand had gone up at that point, and I'm sure from Munster's point of view they thought, right, the play on, I'm just going to take the tap and go. But Edinburgh seemed like they were trying to get reset, and you said there was a little bit of confusion because we were talking live in the radio at the time, and with the reaction from the crowd, I got the feeling that the referee was going to pull it back at that point, because Keith Earls had snuck around on the blind side and went over, but Edinburgh were very quick to get over towards the match officials, and Pascal Gozer, the referee, had McAnally up in his face almost directly after it. They were surprised as Carberry was lining up the conversion at that point. Without that moment, Munster will probably be in quite a bit of trouble here at half-time. And I do wonder, though, if this is going to come back in a tight game in the second half, will Edinburgh look back at the points that they left on the board in the first 15 minutes? They could easily have kicked 1 or 2 of those penalties, and they could be further ahead here at half-time, Nathan.
On that, it was a surprise to see Edinburgh going to the corner so early in the game. Look, they're at home, maybe they're trying to get the crowd riled up, get this early lead, and build momentum very early. But you just think, like, maybe is that a bit of big game experience lacking in Champions Cup quarterfinals? You just want to win by a point. You just want to keep that scoreboard ticking over.
Yeah, I think it probably goes back to what Michael said. They've been pretty efficient at home this season, and they've been really attritional. So, and in fairness, they probably should have scored. I mean, Munster's defence was stretched a couple of times, like I mentioned. Jack O'Donoghue forced an absolute crucial turnover. There was close to half time again. They were running the ball, and Rory Scannell does really well to rip the ball, and then Jean Klein should hold the ball, and then Munster conceded a penalty. So yeah, I mean, maybe we should admire them for showing a bit of ambition, because they have the players to do it. They have, like, they're so dangerous in the back three with Duhan van der Merwe especially. So I think fair play. Like, they're at home, they're trying to set their stall out. Okay, maybe big game experience, but they are ahead at half time, and they're the ones firmly in control.
I presume that decision's made pre-match.
Yeah, and I think actually, if you look at it this year in general, it's become a common trend that teams are more and more kicking for the corner and going for the 5 points. And with the changes in the line-out this year, in general, it's been a pretty much of a mess with referees in terms of their kind of analysis of it, and the amount of penalties that have been given away now from a maul. I don't know what the stats are, but they seem astronomically high this year, and a couple of penalties in a row, and referees are looking to go for the penalty try option. So I don't think it was a bad call by them. But look, if you're playing against Munster, traditionally this fixture wouldn't have been, looking on paper, being a high scoring game, and maybe it is a case of not being in this environment recently in the quarter-final European game. So yeah, maybe it will go back to haunt them, but they should have been at least 5-10 points clear from the first 15 minutes anyway.
Yeah, Will, talk us then about some of the problems for Munster during that first half, particularly the injury problems.
Yeah, well, they had Tyke Byrne in the sin bin for a while with disjointed things, and even John Klein not too long after that went off for a HIA, so their first choice second rows weren't available for a spell during the game. Thankfully, from their point of view, Klein was able to come back on, but then Jack O'Donoghue has gone off for a HIA as well, and it's just kind of maybe disjointed things for them at various stages in this first half. And really, they got to try and get themselves some meaningful possession, I would imagine, early in the second half as well, because a lot of what Munster have actually done in terms of field position has come from kicks from Joey Carberry, one from Andrew Conway at one stage, which he chipped forward and was able to chase down himself. But really, until late in the first half, they haven't really had a platform to maybe soak up a few tackles, use possession defensively maybe, and it has been Edinburgh who've been making most of the line breaks in the first half as well. I just kind of wonder if the hosts are going to think we should be much further ahead at half time.
Yeah, your Irish Independent colleague Rory O'Connor is at the match as well. He was saying that the Joey Carberry injury looked as though it was more shoulder related than hamstring related, which is in one way a good thing that it's not a reoccurrence, but either way, another injury for Joey Carberry at the end of a season is not a good thing for Ireland or for Munster, particularly if they come through this game. Quite often when we watch Munster defend heroically like that, you sort of feel there's a buzz that comes with that, but also if you have to do it 2 or 3 times, it must be just so draining.
Yeah, I mean it is, but I mean the energy, as you said, that derives from them, but they can't be doing it all the time, and we saw the type of game that Edinburgh play. They just don't lose the ball traditionally in the opposition 22, and they have this very, very efficient, albeit not too exciting to watch, where they take their time, they set the ball up, they have 3 forwards all pre-linked, take it into contact, gain a yard, and then eventually they're waiting for the opposition to just falter and get over the line. But with Munster, we've seen, the defences, they were top of the league in their stats in the defence in the Champions Cup pool stages. And if you're going to do it against a team like Munster, sooner or later, the likes of Tyke Byrne over the ball is going to wait for the opportunity, or Jack O'Donoghue in the first half.
Yeah, I think Tyler Blainall coming on for the second half. The one thing is he's quite a similar player to Joey Carberry, so it won't change a huge amount in what they were doing. And he was excellent off the bench last week. JJ Hanrahan has been ahead of him for most of the season. He's had his injury problems, but this is a big chance, I think, for him. Munster fans have seen, him in fits and starts about his best form, but this is a real chance for him now to sort of, remind the fans, because it's easy to forget that this guy came over as an under-20 New Zealand captain, like he was the next Dan Carter. It's kind of time for him now to show it, now that he's had a horrendous time, like I said, with injuries. He's fully
Is he eligible for Ireland yet?
He is, yeah, but he might have gotten a look in if he hadn't been injured so often. But I guess you look at Jack Carty and Ross Byrne have sort of filled in there. It's a long way back for him to get into a World Cup squad at this stage, but this is an ideal stage for him to sort of remind everyone of his quality.
How different is Munster's game plan from Ireland's game plan? And should they revert to an Irish game plan for this second half to just at least try and get some possession?
Yeah, potentially. Look, I think with Joey Carberry going off, it is going to be a bit of a sticking point now for them in their attacking play. I think in terms of the box kicking from Conor Murray, I think he's had a bit of criticism recently for the Irish performances. But I think he's been fairly proficient in the first half of this game. His box kicks have been absolutely on the money every time and almost led to a try for Keith Earls. So I think, as I said, it's not going to be a high-scoring affair in the second half. I don't think it will be anyway. But we'll just have to wait and see. And I think, the scrum has been an important part of this game so far. I think Edinburgh, going into the game, we're probably a little bit ahead of the Munster in terms of that department. So we'll have to wait and see. But it's an exciting second half now that we're going into. But I think Edinburgh will just look to go back to the basics, what they did well in the first half, try and squeeze the Munster front five and try and get some more penalties from the scrum, and then go to that lineup that's been so proficient. But from a Munster point of view, it's I think just holding on at the moment. But hopefully in the second half, from Munster perspective, the likes of Conway need to get on the ball more and just show, and Darren Sweeten out wide to see what they can do.
Yeah, I think the Conway at fullback was an interesting one because
that was a late change.
Yeah, that was a late change, but in my mind that makes Munster a better attacking team than having Mike Haley. I don't think we've seen the best of him since he's come yet. I actually think at fullback is Andrew Conway's best position, and I think if he was playing there more regularly for Munster, he'd have a better chance with Ireland. But I think Joe Schmidt, the problem has been that he sees him more as a winger, so this is really interesting to see how he gets on. I think Darren Sweetenham has almost become the forgotten man, and he's done well in the first half as well. So yeah, it's the changes were enforced, but I think it could be a blessing in disguise. And I don't think Munster are going to be panicking here at half time. I mean, they're only 3 points down, they haven't played yet, so yeah. I think they're sitting okay.
Alright, so it is Edinburgh 10, Munster 7 at half time. Plenty more to come on that game. We'll get on to Leinster against Ulster shortly, but we should mention Connacht last night in the Challenge Cup quarter final. They were beaten by Sale Sharks 20 points to 10. It was a strange game, it was a strange performance. Connacht never really landed a blow on Sale at any stage. AJ McGinty with that brilliant season at Connacht sort of ran the show. They got that late try through Kyle Godwin. Connacht, it was nothing more than a consolation. Sale looked like they were going to win this game from a long way out. Was it a surprising selection from Andy Friend? European quarter final, obviously they're right in the mix in the Pro 14 to get into playoffs, to get into European qualification for next year. But even still, a European quarter-final, he's surprised he didn't go with his full-strength side? Yeah, I am. Look, he's been publicly announced saying that, the priority this year is definitely a Pro 14. But I was personally a little bit surprised and probably a little bit disappointed of the selection that he went for. Now, albeit a couple of the players, Jared Butler and Tiernan O'Halloran were omitted through injury, which was a big loss for them. He did rest the likes of Alton Delan, Quinn Roux, Matt Healy as well. There were some guys coming in who hadn't had much game time, and I think that showed in the first half. He had his first choice props, Finlay Beelum and Dennis Buckley on the bench. 20 points to 3 down at half time. They played like a team that hadn't played together this set of 15 anyway. The likes of Niedi Olu can first start since November. And I think it showed in defence and for a few, especially for the first 2 tries from Sale. But yeah, I just think the momentum they created from the great win against Benetton the week before, they've got a massive showdown against Cardiff in 2 weeks' time. Next weekend, they have Zebre away, albeit Zebre aren't as bad as they used to be. But I just felt that they could have gone in this game with a little bit more of the frontline starters playing, because after all, it is a quarterfinal in Europe and a great opportunity. Yeah,
I think it was a case of you're damned if you do, damned if you don't, because when you look at it, Andy Friend was forced to play Jack Hartley because they simply didn't have another fit-out half. He gets injured and they desperately need him. You mentioned Finlay Beelum started on the bench. He comes on and suffered what looked at the time like a really bad injury, but thankfully I think Connacht have come out today and said, he came out himself and said that there was no broken bones. It looked horrendous. He was getting sick coming off the pitch. So when you look at it that way, Andy Friend could go, well, this is why I didn't want to play my big guns, because they need those 2 guys in particular are absolutely key.
These are the decisions a Connacht coach is always going to have to face when you don't have the squad depth at this time of the season. And I guess now all it does is put huge pressure on that Cardiff game. Like, that's their season.
It is. I think it probably should up, and I think everyone, even the most staunch Connacht fan, would say that the depth just isn't there. I mean, the guys who are coming in, there is a bit of a gap. When Connacht have their full 15, they're a match for anyone. And to be honest, I'm a bit disappointed, but I can totally understand where Andy Friend was coming from. if at the end of the day Connacht are playing in the Champions Cup next season via the Pro 14, this will all be forgotten about, and a disappointing quarter-final to Sale will sort of pale in significance to what it really means. Yeah,
it was a bit disappointing, a bit worrying seeing Jack Carty go off in the start of the second half with a bicep injury, but I don't think it's as bad. I mean, if
so, we've had Jack Carty go off last night, Joey Carberry go off today, Johnny Sexton not playing for Leinster. I'm starting to think maybe there is something in Andy Dunn's theory of Ireland's attritional game plan is eventually going to catch up with them.
Yeah. It just shows Tyler Blaine here's a big chance, like I was saying.
Tyler Blaine, that is our starting 10 at the World Cup.
He's the saviour for Irish rugby.
Let's get on then. We'll chat more, obviously, Monday Night Rugby, Wednesday Night Rugby, about Connacht, and particularly leading up to that Cardiff game in a couple of weeks. But our live commentary is Leinster against Ulster, 5:45 start time at the Aviva Stadium. Listening to Leo Cullen yesterday, if this was Saracens coming to Dublin, would Johnny Sexton be starting?
I don't know. I think the Ulster contingent there maybe felt that there was an undertone of that. Personally, I don't think so at all. Sometimes we're not told the full extent of players' injuries. Maybe he is injured. We got word of it in the paper on Thursday about it. I believe Connacht were aware of it as well on Thursday, that Ross Byrne was going to be playing. So it was interesting. We were chatting to Dan McFarland yesterday at the captain's run, and he was sort of saying that it won't change the way we play and that it's not an advantage, but come on, it has to be a massive psychological advantage to see the World Player of the Year. No matter his form hasn't been as bad as people have made out, it just hasn't been as good as what we know he can be, but it has to be an advantage when you're running out there and you're seeing Ross Byrne and not Johnny Sexton there. But yeah, I don't buy into that theory at all. I think the selection is very interesting. I think there's been so much focus on Johnny Sexton and Ross Byrne, but for me, arguably the more interesting one is Jordan Larmour and Rob Kearney. And I think
where actually you've got two players who are fit, and Leo Cullen and Stuart Lancaster have made a decision not to include Rob Kearney for one of the biggest games of the season.
Absolutely, and I think Leo Cullen and Stuart Lancaster deserve credit here because they're picking players on form. It's been a slight criticism of Ireland over the last few weeks that players are picked on reputations, but even if you look at Jack McGrath and Ed Byrne, that's who they see as their form sub Loosehead. So I think the Leinster coaching staff deserve a lot of credit.
Do they also want to play in a slightly more expansive way than Ireland?
Yes, I think under Stuart Lancaster, Leinster have been looking to play a more expansive style of play. Even if you look at the back three that Jordan Larmour is going to be playing with, Dave Kearney, who is almost resurrected from the dead almost, and then Adam Byrne, who's another player who been at the fringes of the Ireland squad, but Leinster see them differently, and we saw this during the Six Nations when Sean O'Brien was sent back and Sean Cronin, and the Irish coaching staff expected them to play, but Leo Cullen and Stuart Lancaster were like, we already have our team picked, we don't need to change it up here. So it's an interesting dynamic, but I think fair dues to them for sticking to their guns with what they see as their best form players.
Even with Johnny Sexton injured, it's still a 14-point spread in favour of Leinster for this game. They're still overwhelming favourites. It is a very new look Leinster. Like, there's quite a spine of the team missing there, from Devin Toner, Josh van der Fleer, Johnny Sexton, Robbie Henshaw, Rob Kearney. At the start of the season, these are 5 players you would have thought would be key if you were going to want to win a Champions Cup.
Absolutely, and a big day for the likes of Rory O'Loughlin as well. And I think, especially considering the centre partnership that Ulster have gone with today in Darren Cave and Stuart McCloskey, and great to see Luke back on Marshall back on the bench for Ulster as well. So with the selection of the likes of Darren Cave and Stuart McCloskey, they're going to be being pretty direct and testing out the defensive capabilities of O'Loughlin and Ringrose.
We've heard a lot about Gary Ringrose's leadership, and it's something Leinster have spent a lot of time working on over the last year, 18 months, 2 years at this stage, to turn him into a more vocal presence in the back line. It's days like this where that bears fruition, because he's pretty much the most senior player there now.
Yeah, it's actually something I've noticed as well on the pitch. I remember it was very interesting that he played the last November game against the States, because that was very much a second string team. But Joe Schmidt has been putting him into these situations, because he wants him to grow into a leader. And I remember the States scored an early try in that game, and under the post after it was Gary Ringrose who was the one doing all the talking. And actually before the France game at home in the Six Nations, I sort of tend to watch, the warm-ups and stuff, and at one point the backs all got together, and it wasn't Johnny Sexton doing the talking at this particular moment, it was Gary Ringrose. So yeah, they have been trying to push him out of his comfort zone a little bit. He's not he doesn't talk a lot, but they're trying to get him to do it more, and yeah, he's going to need to do that today alongside Rory O'Loughlin, who I think is a massively underrated player, to be honest. I think every successful squad needs a player like Rory O'Loughlin. You can play him anywhere across the backline and you know what you're going to get. He was man of the match in the Munster game at the Aviva earlier this season, and he played alongside Ringrose, so I think he's an excellent player to have come in. You look at someone like Joe Tamane, who, you know, Leinster paying him a lot of money to come in, and obviously he's had his injury problems, but his Leinster career hasn't quite happened yet, and it's good to see Rory O'Loughlin. And it goes back to, again, you know, not picking players on reputation, because Joe Tamane has obviously won a ton of caps for Australia, and Rory O'Loughlin been on the fringes of the Irish squad. So again, this is what Leo Cullen and Stuart Lancaster see as their form players, and it's good, that they're picking them on form.
Obviously, it's only a fortnight since these players were properly beaten up by Wales, an awful lot of them on both sides. Have you any doubts about the mentality of any of these players? Like, some of these guys are going through the first dip in form of their career, and James Ryan had a good solid Six Nations, but somebody like Tyke Furlong, who hasn't been able to hit the heights this season of the last couple of years, that actually, you know, they're heading into a Champions Cup quarter-final where they're not really in the frame of mind they have been over the last couple of seasons.
I think it's probably a nice kind of change of scenery, and, you know, as I said, been in Carlton House for 6-7 weeks, you know, almost like a prison camp at some stages, and you know, just to get to your own bed for most of the days of the week, and just, you know, relaxing your own environment, and going back to a culture, and I'm sure from the minute they arrived back in training camp in Leinster, you know, looking at Leo Cullen and Stuart Lancaster just breeding confidence, and I'm sure they've been in contact with them throughout the Six Nations period. So I think it's probably come at a good time for them, and they're going back into a team with a winning culture. Albeit now they lost against Edinburgh last weekend, but, you know, they probably, you know, if you look at the two teams, more played the Leinster setup team probably haven't played as much together as the Ulster team, and that could be telling, especially in the first 20 minutes, because, you know, if Dan McFarlane is going to have the Ulster boys absolutely revelled up to high heaven.
I would say Jordy Murphy is going to nail somebody in the first couple of minutes.
Well, yeah, he's not the only one. There's a lot of ex-Leinster guys. I mean, not even the heralded stars. You look at someone like Eric O'Sullivan, Nick Timoney, Alan O'Connor on the bench. You know, we'll obviously look at Marty Moore and Jordy Murphy, but yeah, it was interesting. I was at both press conferences earlier this week. Leinster on Monday and up in Ulster then on Tuesday, and it was very interesting to gauge the different moods within the two camps. I think there's a soreness in the Leinster squad because they have so many of the frontline Irish guys, and they're, you know, Leo Cullen speaking about both guys being really annoyed, you know, eager to prove a point, and you sort of expect that there's a big performance coming, and then you go to Ulster and look, they're in bonus territory getting to a Champions Cup quarter-final, and Dan McFarlane, you know, essentially said as much. It doesn't lessen the disappointment if they didn't win, but no one gave them a chance of getting out of that, what was a really tricky pool with the Scarlets, Leicester and Racing. So to come out of that pool, they did really well. They're in bonus territory now, so I actually think there's less pressure on them, if you know what I mean. Like, this is a free shot almost.
Oh, there is, and Leo Cullen is obviously going to say that these players are sore and they want to prove a point. Like, that can go two ways, though. You're 15 minutes into the match, things aren't going well. Suddenly, what's freshest in your mind? Well, actually, things weren't going well a fortnight ago either, or for the last 2-3 months. Maybe our form just isn't there.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's some combinations there who, as I said, who haven't played much game time together. As we talked about the centre partnership, and for Ulster, you know, the fact that the game has been played at the Aviva, I think, is a positive for them. There's a lot of Irish players in the Ulster setup who it won't faze them, and guys who haven't played at the Aviva, there's a lot of knowledge base there to tell them the lay of the land and just the little things that might go their way. So, you know, traditionally, the teams don't win away from home in European quarter-finals. But I think the 14-point spread is very optimistic. I think it's going to be a lot closer than that. And Ulster will feel they have a real opportunity to cause a massive upset today.
Where did they get at Leinster? Where did they disrupt Leinster?
Well, look, it's a bit of a cliche, but up front it's going to be a huge test for the Ulster front five. I mean, you've got, you know, Cian Healy, Sean Cronin, who's up again, trying to make a point now after his omission from the last couple of rounds of the Six Nations, and Tyke Furlong. They brought Scott Fardy in to the omission of James Lowe because of obviously the loss of Dev and James Ryan. So you look at Eric O'Sullivan, who's had a big season so far. Marty Moore, who's had a big point to prove now. You know, he's been under the radar since he's come back from Ulster. So he's going to be looking to make a point as well. But Ian Henderson coming back is just a huge boost for the Ulster setup. And not having him in the team, I think Ulster's chances would have been almost at a big dent if he doesn't play. but him starting, I think, gives them a big impetus.
Yeah, they need Ian Henderson on one leg, and they need him playing. Even there was doubts earlier in the week when I was up in Belfast. Marcel Coetzee was supposed to be doing media, but was pulled at the last minute because he had to go off and do rehab. But from what I believe, he doesn't train like most normal players because of his injuries, almost like a Paul McGrath. He has to be
turns up on the day.
Yeah, sort of tailored. But there was some talk yesterday then at the captain's run that he was going to be having a late fitness test, and he's another player who, if Ulster have any chance at all, he has to play. But I think in terms of getting after Leinster, they'll probably look back at the Bath game, Bath against Leinster in the Rec. Now, conditions were absolutely horrendous that day, but Bath played two natural open sides in Francois Lowe and Sam Underhill, and they disrupted Leinster constantly. They won the breakdown battle. Leinster managed to get away with a scrappy win, but it proved absolutely crucial. Now, again, the conditions are not going to be the same. It's going to be a perfect day for rugby, but in Jordy Murphy and Marcel Coetzee, they have two tailor-made players who can get after Leinster at the breakdown. So it's going to be interesting, even on the Leinster side of things. Dan Levy came back last week, but they've gone with Sean OBrien, and this is a big game for Sean OBrien. He hasn't shown anything like his best form, and if the longer it keeps going on, his World Cup place becomes in jeopardy, in my view. You talk about picking on reputations, but we haven't seen the best of him.
Yeah, it's huge for quite a few of these players. You don't want to talk about everything with the World Cup in mind, because these games are massive on their own merit in a Champions Cup quarter-final. But as you say, for Sean OBrien, if Leinster weren't to win this game, if Ulster were to somehow pull off an upset, Sean OBrien probably doesn't have another opportunity before the World Cup squad in a game like this to prove himself.
And especially if someone like Jordy Murphy is the one who gets one over on him, because he's, on the fringes. Joe Schmidt has proven time and time again that he really likes Jordy Murphy. He's versatile.
Would you have Jordy Murphy ahead of Sean OBrien in...
Well, I think the thing about Jordy Murphy was he wasn't given any favours, because he started at number 8 against Italy, and that's not his best position. And the reason he moved to Ulster was to get more game time at open side, and he's been playing outstanding rugby for Ulster because he's been playing his preferred position. When he was at Leinster, he was able to play 6, 7, 8, and then I'd say he was gutted as well, because obviously the game didn't go.
And he talked it up so much in the media interviews that week about how this was his one big chance and he was going to take it.
Yeah, and he's going to say that anyway, but you'd hope that isn't his chance gone, because that's not his position. If he is to go to the World Cup, he's not going to be going as a number 8. It's going to be, as an upside. But it's hard to say. I mean, if Ulster were to win today and Jordy Murphy was to play well, you'd have to worry for what it meant for Sean OBrien. Unless, of course, he plays out of his skin and Leinster still lose. But if Sean OBrien plays out of his skin, the chances are Leinster are going to win, that kind of way, because he's still obviously an incredible player, but we just haven't seen it this season.
I think from an Ulster perspective as well, I think for Ulster to win today, I think Mike Lowry has to have a big game as well. I mean, it's under the high ball has been, for a fact that they're going to be targeting that. I think he's had a few kind of dodgy moments with the ball kicking from the 10 to receive it. So I think that's going to be a huge battle for him today, especially with the likes of Ross Byrne being very proficient in his up and unders.
They really like Michael Lowry actually up in Ulster. I think he's a natural out half. He's almost become like a Joey Carberry in that he's been playing full back to try and get your best players on the pitch, but they rate this guy really highly. I was up at Ulster's first game of the Champions Cup against Leicester, and it was his first time playing full back, and he dropped a couple of early ones, but he recovered really well. And for a young guy, I thought that was a real, a promising sign of the character of him, and he's played really well. I think Leinster will look to get at him. I think you can expect Luke McGrath to be sending plenty of aerial bombardment down his channel, but that's another key battle I think as well. I was writing about it in today's paper. Luke McGrath and John Cooney, that's a fascinating matchup, because Luke McGrath was well in the hunt of getting in the World Cup spot, and I know you said it's impossible basically to view these games not with your sort of World Cup hat on, because
unless there's injuries, only one of them is going to the World Cup. Well,
it's interesting, because if you look back in 2015, Ireland only brought 2 scrum halves because Ian Madigan covered scrum half, so they brought 2 and 3. Now I'd be surprised if they did it, but the fact Cooney has played out half plenty in his career, that he kicks goals, and also he had a brilliant Six Nations. I thought he was one of the few players who came out of it. Himself, Dave Kilcoyne, 2 to spring to mind, with their reputations enhanced. Chatting to him yesterday, he was up the captain's run. He was gutted not to have gotten a selection for the Wales game. Kieran Marmion obviously was fit again, but you could kind of understand that Joe Schmidt wanted to get him game time.
So do you think there's a possibility Schmidt takes 5 out halves again rather than 6?
See, Joey Carberry has played scrum half in his younger days. Now obviously he hasn't played it in professional rugby, but I think someone like John Cooney, for what he brings, his pass is incredible as well, his service is very snappy. I think he's a guy that could be very, very handy in a World Cup squad, because again, he's such a reliable goal kicker as well, and that's no slight on Luke McGrath. His injury, came at a good time, at a bad time. I was trying to make the point today in that, you know, he missed the entire Six Nations with another knee injury, but if he was to miss the end of the season, then that's his World Cup chances over. So I think he's playing a little bit of catch up. Obviously Conor Murray is going. Kieran Marmion has so much credit in you know, the bank of Schmidt. And in fairness, he's never let Ireland down. You'd imagine he's going. And I think there'd be one other between John Cooney and Luke McGrath.
Let's very quickly go back to Murrayfield, because there's been scores for both sides at the start of this second half, Will.
Yeah, penalties have been exchanged here, Nathan. Tyler Blindall putting over a penalty 6 minutes into the second half when Bill Matta was caught for a high tackle on Keith Earls, but Edinburgh have settled a bit since then. Munster having a good spell early in the second half, and Van de Velde has just took over a penalty to put them back ahead by 13 points to 10. We're ticking now into the 53rd minute. We're looking at the half-time stats, Nathan. It was interesting to see Munster were so reliant on their defence in that first half. They had less than 40% possession, and they had only 32% of the territory in the first half as well. It's been better in these first 10 minutes or so of the second half, but Munster are trailing still. It's Edinburgh who lead here by 13 points to 10.
So I said earlier how Rory O'Connor said it was a shoulder injury. Murray Kinsella says that Joey Carberry's got some ice on his hamstring on the sideline. Who do I believe? Who do I trust anymore? What are you seeing, Will?
I'm trying to look down at the moment to see where he is, because he's in behind the perspex at the moment, and Murray Kinsella might be slightly lower down than I am.
Do I believe new media or old media? I'm just not sure. Maybe it was a bit of both. Either way, we'll try and find out after the match. And listen, if Munster were to lose this game, it probably doesn't have a huge amount of relevance, because Joey Carberry can rest up and maybe take the rest of the season off. I know there's a Pro 14 to go and get himself ready for a World Cup, but there's a long way to go between now and then. Edinburgh 13, Munster 10. We got to wrap it up, lads. What's your prediction?
For the Munster game?
Well, you're watching the Munster game. Do you think Munster are just going to somehow grind this out?
The longer it goes on like this, then you know, tradition tells that they're going to find something from somewhere. The likes of Conway last year.
Andrew Conway moment.
Yeah, this is a very interesting. Look, you see Conor Murray and Keith Earls both in the Munster line out here. That's a move that Ireland have used in the Six Nations. It's been very interesting.
Yeah, so deep inside the Munster 22, they go along with it though, and Munster trying to get the maul going now. Edinburgh 13, Munster 10. Leinster Ulster predictions?
I think, look, Ulster think they will have a great opportunity with this, because of the injuries to Leinster and the form of some of the players involved. But as we said earlier, tradition tells you that teams don't really win away from home, and I think Leinster will just about have enough ammunition to get them over the line.
Yeah, I think the start is absolutely crucial. If Leinster start well, I think there is a danger that we might see that handicap, that spread, you know, coming into fruition. But on the other side, if Ulster start well, the doubts, Nathan, that you said, you know, will start creeping into these guys' heads again. So I think it will take a monumental effort if Ulster are to do it. But I still think, even with, I think, you know, Sexton, Henshaw, these guys out is definitely a leveller. But this Leinster team still have a lot of quality, and they're still the European champions for a reason. So yeah, I'd imagine they'll beat it, but maybe not by as many as the bookies reckon. Yeah, Munster still pummeling away inside the Edinburgh 22, 55 minutes gone. Can they get the breakthrough and get their second try of the game? They go out wide, and it's Darren Sweetenham gets right up to the line. He's just held up short of the line, and they're not quite there. Munster trailing by 13 points to 10. This is a big moment in this Heineken Champions Cup quarter-final. Have they done enough this time? The referee's right over it. He says no. So Munster will have to try and go again. They're appealing that they've got the try. The referee blows his whistle. I think they're going to go back for a penalty to Munster. The referee says no try. It is going to be a Munster penalty. Yeah, it should be yellow card as well. It was incredibly cynical. You talk about Ty Byrne got binned in the first half or something similar. This should be yellow card as well. I think it was WP now, was it? Yeah. Typical prop trying to just get up from taking his time to get up after the tackle. So we've Will O'Callaghan over at Murrayfield. We'll keep you up to date with that throughout the afternoon. Cian Treacy from the Irish Independent, thanks as always for joining us in studio. Michael Swift as well. Entrepreneur, what's the name of the hair products? Frankman, www.frankmangrooming.com. I'm wearing it in my hair, and we're live on all our social channels. I have to say, you look fantastic. Thank you very much. Do you think I could be an influencer? Absolutely. Will you pay me to wear this? Well, maybe some free product. There we go. How about that sound? I'm easily bought. Keane could do with some as well. I must give you my address. No problem at all. All right, great stuff. Plenty more rugby to come. We're across the Aviva Stadium from 4:30. Kevin McLaughlin, Bernard Jackman and Mike McCarthy will be alongside Owen for our build-up show in the lay-up box, and then I'll be there with live commentary alongside Conor Morris, Andy Dunn, Liam Toland and Kevin McLaughlin. We're here all the way through till 8 o'clock. Edinburgh 13, Munster 10. Munster, though, inside the Edinburgh 22. Scrum coming up. We'll be across to Will O'Callaghan shortly, and up next we're talking football.
Join that conversation. Text us